Hi, my name is Sylvie. I am a certified health coach and yoga instructor, and today we're going to be looking at the question, should I eat more protein? I started wondering that myself as I was listening to a lot of health experts in the world of intermittent fasting and also perimenopause, menopause. It is a very common recommendation to make sure that you eat enough protein. And then I was also experimenting with my diet, tracking my macros with a certain app, and I could never hit the target. I started asking myself, should I eat more protein? And that's what gave me the idea for this video and the blog post that you can find in the description below. The blog post contains tons of links to studies and more information if you want to check it out. But in this video, I will be covering the effect of protein on weight loss, and we're going to talk about the consequences of eating too little or too much protein, even if that's even possible. Lastly, I'm going to give you some recommendations to help you figure out how much protein you should eat. Let's start by looking at how eating protein helps you lose weight. There's 4 mechanisms that I want to discuss, and the first one is protein increases satiety. An obvious factor that contributes to weight gain is overeating. Protein has been found to increase satiety and thereby decrease calorie intake. Compared to carbohydrates and fats, protein takes longer to digest and makes you feel full longer. Plus, you'll rarely see someone overeat on protein. Whenever you crave food, you'll crave either carbs or fats. Next, protein boosts your metabolism, or in a more scientific way, it is thermogenic. And when we talk about a food that's thermogenic or the thermic effect of food, what we are referring to is the energy expenditure that comes with the digestion and the absorption of the nutrients found in this food. And protein has the highest thermic effect of all the foods. Next, protein preserves muscle mass. I'm sure you're aware that weight loss naturally will cause some loss in muscle mass, but muscle mass is really important to maintain your metabolism, obviously maintain your overall health as well. So making sure that you're consuming sufficient protein while losing weight will help mitigate that effect. And lastly, protein enhances fat burning. Well, beyond making you feel full longer and preserving your muscle mass, research shows that protein may increase your fat burning processes. High protein diets have been found to increase fat oxidation, meaning that your body becomes more efficient at utilizing stored fat for energy. Okay, so now you have a pretty good idea of how protein can help you achieve your weight loss goals. But is it possible to eat too much protein or maybe to eat too little protein? And if so, what are the consequences of that? Let's start by looking at the consequences of eating too little protein. Well, first, it turns out that protein deficiency is almost unheard of in the developed world. A diet that is filled with nutrient-dense food will naturally provide enough protein for your needs. But what would it look like if you were not consuming enough protein? Here's some adverse effects that you may notice. Muscle loss, weakened immune system, slow wound healing, and lastly, hormonal imbalances. I think maybe that's one reason why health experts that target menopausal and perimenopausal women often really emphasize the need for consuming more protein. Then, if you really focus on eating more and more and more protein, could there be some adverse effects? Are there consequences to eating too much protein? Well, after doing some research, I found 4 possible consequences. The first one is increased cancer risks, and that one is pretty much universally recognized. There's many studies that you can find online that seem to point to an increase in cancer risk when you increase your protein intake. However, many people in like the paleo world, intermittent fasting world, keto world will point to the fact that those studies do not make a distinction between the types of animal products that people are getting their protein from. For example, whether it's beef from feedlots or grass-fed beef, that is not taken into consideration. So that's for you to maybe look into, do some more research and see what you're comfortable with. But one thing that I have found when I was looking at those studies is that sometimes they don't even seem to make a distinction between animal and plant-based protein. So it's not just about where you're sourcing your meat from. It does seem to me like protein on its own may increase your cancer risk. And the mechanism behind that is the same mechanism that explains the next two adverse consequences that I wanted to talk about. And those two consequences are accelerated aging and an increase in chronic disease. The way this works is kind of complicated. I'm going to try to make it simple, but obviously I'm going to oversimplify it. Your insulin growth factor 1 activates the mTOR pathway, which promotes the breakdown of protein and cell growth. And that cellular growth and proliferation is at the basis of cancer. Also, elevated insulin growth factor 1 levels and increased mTOR activity increases the risk of chronic diseases and various physiological and pathological conditions. Also, I have found some studies that suggest that restricting protein promotes healthy cellular aging. I mean, that is one of the main concepts behind the fasting mimicking diet, which we've talked about on this channel. The fasting mimicking diet is a 5-day fast that helps regenerate your body, that helps heal your body through a fast that is very, very low in protein and calorie, because both of these factors together will reduce your insulin-like growth factor 1 and your mTOR activity. So I don't know if that makes sense, but it is best I could do to explain this. I actually struggled a lot. You'd see that if I were to show you the unedited version of this video. And the last adverse effect of too much protein that I wanted to talk about is weight gain. Now, this may seem a bit counterintuitive since we've talked about how consuming more protein is beneficial for weight loss, but there is a caveat, and that caveat is that if you increase your protein consumption without increasing your overall calorie intake, then that could help you lose weight. The issue is that sometimes you may find that trying to increase your protein consumption to hit certain targets necessitates consuming more calories. Okay, so now let's talk about how much protein you should eat a day. I'm going to give you some numbers. We're going to dive into that. But first, I would like to just say, just eat and don't worry about it. Like, you don't need to worry about the number of grams of protein you're consuming each day. That's my gut instinct here. But I know some people like to know stuff, like have numbers and like to track their foods or whatever. So I did some research and this is what I came up with. First, I want to say that you'll often hear a recommendation that states 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. That's very common in the world of weightlifting, but it's also very common in the world of intermittent fasting and aging women. But literally, when I researched it, I found recommendations that range from 46 grams of protein a day, and really easy to achieve just by eating wholesome foods, to 150 grams of protein a day. Even up to 200, although most sources that I looked into considered 200 grams to be excessive. If you're curious, you can start logging your foods, eat your regular wholesome diet, and see how much protein you're getting, and most likely you'll fall in somewhere in between this range, which is perfectly healthy.